One of the things that you never hear, except in broadcasts like this one, is that we basically do not have a food agriculture in the United States. Most people think of agriculture, even agribusiness, well, it's producing food. We often say, oh, we're the food capital of the world, we have the most successful agriculture. Not true. Not true at all. We basically have what we would call a commodity agriculture, which is primarily not based in feeding people and feeding people important, nutritious, and diverse food, but rather produce commodities. And what do I mean by that? Right now, over 55% of all of our cropland in the United States is devoted to corn and soy. Yeah, well, the fact of the matter is that feeds directly almost no one. Over 40% of corn goes into gasoline. Another 50% of corn goes into animal factories, dairy factories, all these confinement operations for animals. A lot of the rest of it goes into high fructose corn syrup and all of these processed food agents that we don't need and we shouldn't have. And then we have some sweet corn over there that we eat, but the vast majority, well over 90% of all the corn that we produce, well over 90%, does not directly feed any American. And yet, well over a quarter of our cropland is devoted to it. What does it feed? It feeds the bottom line of Monsanto, because most of it's genetically engineered, over 90% of that's genetically engineered, and the big ag business companies who sell those commodities to the animal factories as fuel and for these processed agents. Same is true with soy. 30–40% of soy goes into gasoline. A huge amount of it goes into these horrifying chicken factories that it's so cruel and terrible. A huge amount of it goes into soy lecithin and all those things you see on the back of that package of the food that processed food nobody should be eating. And only a very, very small amount of that actually goes to humans to eat for food. So when we talk about great yields, we are talking about commodity agriculture, not food agriculture. If we were to say we're going to now judge American agriculture compared to world agriculture by nutrition per acre, not by dollar or yield per acre, we would be in a terrible, terrible position, way down in the world, because we don't produce that much nutrition per acre, because we're producing all this commodity agriculture, right? And yet nutrition is what we should be about. If the whole world adopted our agriculture, commodity agriculture, starvation would go even exponentially higher than it is right now. This is a terrible, terrible way to try and grow food. And this is really important to know. So when you hear the GMO guys, Monsanto say, "Oh, we need GMOs to feed the world," and if we're going to do that, we're going to, you people who are against GMOs, that means we're going to have to go into very sensitive areas and cut down the trees and kill everything so we can grow crops. Because wrong. Let's just take that 55+% of cropland that's going into commodities and actually get it into food. How's that? Different kinds of grains, right? Have diverse farms, small farms in those areas. Rejuvenate our farm communities. Rejuvenate our soil. Have the kind of, organic and beyond agroecological farming that we want. We could feed all of Americans and probably a good part of the world with that. Instead, we're using it commodities for these bottom lines. So it is incredibly hypocritical for Monsanto and these people to say, oh, we're going to try and feed the world when they're devoting well over half of our cropland to feeding their bottom line to these commodity crops. So it's really important to remember, commodity agriculture, nothing to do with nutrition, food. Food agriculture, that's less than half of what we do in this country, much less than half. You almost never hear that, but that's really what it's going to take, is to take that commodity agriculture, get it back into food agriculture, and that's one of the things we need to do to save our agricultural system. That's part of what our new food future looks like. One of the many problems there is with when we say, well, we are feeding this corn, at least we're feeding it to animals, then we're going to end up eating the animals. Well, first of all, that's not the natural, right? That's not the natural food. If you look at, right now, all these mega dairies, they're not dairies, they're milk factories. 15,000 cows, confined, horrible animal suffering, you name it, chemicals, you name it, right? Well, they're not feeding them hay, which is the natural food, right? Alfalfa, the natural food for dairy cows. They're feeding them corn, right? Which creates all sorts of digestive problems. It creates all sorts of physical problems for these animals, biological issues, right? They shouldn't be feeding them that at all, but it's profitable, so they do. And then if you look at the conversion, in other words, you look at all the calories that are going from those crops into those animals, there's a tremendous conversion loss. right? So in other words, for 1 calorie of beef, you're going to have many calories of corn. For 1 calorie of chicken, many soy. So it's a terrible conversion of those crops into calories, into energy. All it does is, again, fit the bottom line. So even though indirectly we're getting some of those calories, actually it is a terrible conversion rate, and it's a terrible suffering to those animals who shouldn't be eating these unnatural foods for them anyway.